told your friend you're not okay? And tell me what's wrong and why you never said you felt that way.
I recently asked for suggestions on what video topics everyone would like to see, and one that came up that seemed really interesting was how to land your first job as a new software engineer. I've hired thousands of employees in my career, and somewhere around 30 plus software engineers, and I have some suggestions and advice that will hopefully help you land that first job with a little less pain and frustration. The first job is always the hardest. You don't have a network to rely on. As a software developer, over half of my jobs have come from knowing someone at a company and that person making a recommendation on my behalf. But for your first job, chances are you're doing this the hard way, applying to a bunch of open positions and hoping for the best. You're also at a disadvantage because of a lack of job experience. Hiring managers are often making a decision by looking at a giant stack of resumes for every open position, and your resume is going to be extremely bare. I'm going to share a few tips on how to make your resume stand out later in this video, but this is just one more thing that makes your first job that much more difficult. The first thing that I think is crucial to a successful job search is to create a routine. It's best if you treat your job search like it's your job. Wake up early, shower, grab a coffee, and then start your work. Break down your day into time blocks and find a schedule that works best for you. I do my best programming in the morning and late at night, so I do all of my programming projects then. But when you're applying for hundreds of jobs and hunting around looking for cool opportunities, this is the ideal task to do in the afternoon after you've finished eating and maybe you're a little bit sleepy. You can almost go on autopilot and just go from one open position to the next. I think most job searches can be broken down into two discrete phases. The first phase is the application phase, where your goal is to apply to as many open positions as possible while simultaneously practicing your interview skills and strengthening your portfolio at the same time. If you've just graduated from college or are coming from a different career background, it's perfectly fine to have a very short work experience section in your resume. If you've worked at Burger King flipping burgers, you don't need to include bullet points of all your job responsibilities like taking out the trash and taking customer orders. Just include the dates that you worked there, the company, and your job title. Hiring managers know that you're going for your first professional job, and we don't need a full list of all your responsibilities working a register or cooking in the kitchen. Just list it and move on. If you have worked in an IT-related field, include the relevant duties and skills if they apply to an engineering or computer-based role. One of the things that will really make you stand out from all the other entry-level applicants is to have a really good portfolio showing all of your projects. You also want to go through your GitHub profile and make sure that it's designed to make you look like someone who really cares about software development. In GitHub, you can pin 6 repositories to your profile page, so make sure those pinned repos are a good reflection of your skills and passions. During this application phase, it's critical for you to work on projects constantly. Build small applications like a small to-do list application or a real-time chat server. Pick projects that let you try specific frameworks and technologies and get some experience with real-world coding projects. If you have some repositories or projects in there from school, take a little bit of time and clean up the README files and make sure that your portfolio and your profile reflects your love of programming. As you move into the next phase and start taking interviews, it's extremely important that you refresh yourself on LeetCode and AlgoExpert style coding interview questions. There are a handful of really important algorithms that come up time and time again in a lot of technical interviews, and if you're going to spend the application phase practicing these coding techniques, you should try to turn each algorithm into an open source library implementation and shove it into your GitHub repository. If you're practicing anyway, you should kill 2 birds with 1 stone and let your practice be a specific project that you can show off in your portfolio and profile pages. If you add a nice README file and a clean design interface, now you can list this as an open source library project and take credit for that type of work. And as you do all of this, it's important to remember that this is purely a numbers game. You should apply to any open position in any location that you're willing to work. If you live in Georgia but are willing to work in Chicago, you should search for jobs in Georgia, Chicago, and literally everything listed as remote. You might actually have to apply for 1,000 positions to get 100 phone interviews to get 10 in-person interviews. Apply to everything that is the slightest bit interesting to you. Don't lie in your application, but there are lots of companies that will have job postings for a mid-level developer with 5 years of experience in a random list of technologies. Apply for that anyway. They might not have good applicants, but if it's something you're interested in, you can make a strong case for yourself in a phone interview and get them to take a chance on someone less experienced. Almost every job I've ever gotten involved a brand new technology stack. Before joining a game development studio, I'd never worked on a modern game project with an engine like Unity, but I had software engineering skills and was able to apply my experience to quickly learning Unity. Apply for everything. You're going to be applying for a ton of jobs. I suggest creating a Google spreadsheet of all the jobs you're applying for to keep things organized for yourself. Another trick I've used in the past is to create a quick reference sheet in that same spreadsheet with all of the unique fields that every company seems to ask about. You're going to spend so much time writing each answer, so save yourself a bunch of time, put it in a spreadsheet so that you can copy and paste it from future applications. If you're applying for jobs in a different industry vertical, like web development versus game development, you can tailor a short bio or cover letter for each type of that industry. The only people seeing your applications are the people that work at that company, so if you have a generic cover letter or intro that you spent time writing well, you should reuse it as often as possible. Then, if you need to tailor the intro to a specific job, you can do that individually, except now you're not stuck writing 2 paragraphs of the same content over and over and over again in each application. The next major phase is the interview phase. After you've applied for hundreds of companies, you're going to start getting responses. Every company runs their hiring process a little bit differently, but you can generally expect 1 phone screen and at least 1 in-person or video chat interview per interested company. Each part of this process is designed from the company's perspective to weed out people that aren't a good fit. For phone screens, most of the time they're just trying to see if you're an interesting person that they'd be willing to spend a few hours with in a more in-depth technical interview. You can't really prepare for this by the time a phone screen is scheduled, so you should have a few basic talking points rehearsed and ready to go. Be prepared to talk about yourself for 30 to 60 seconds, what sorts of things you enjoy, your background, things like that. And really remember, the goal of the phone screen is to get the other person on the other end of the line to say, yeah, Eric seems like a cool guy, let's bring him in for an interview. If you do get to an in-person interview, you want to maximize your chances of getting hired. So I always spend a few hours beforehand jotting down some notes about the company, such as what technologies they use, what products they sell. If they're using a new technology I've never used before, I might actually spend some time building a few projects and working through some tutorials. Really, the secret here is that you want to prepare for each company individually. If you're applying for 1,000 companies, you might only actually get 10 in-person interviews, so take the time and do plenty of homework on that company. And when you get to the in-person interview, bring a notebook filled with all of your notes about that company. Have a few good questions ready to go that are specific to them. Ask about their business and engineering culture. Most importantly, show passion. As a hiring manager, by the time we've sifted through hundreds of resumes and scheduled a few in-person interviews, we've narrowed down the pool of applicants to just the few handful that seemed interesting. You don't actually have to be interesting, you just have to seem interesting. You're trying to be a professional software engineer, and as my friend Mike likes to say, programming is the closest thing we have to actual magic, and that we, software engineers, are wizards. We type on a keyboard and revenue pops out of thin air. Show that joy and passion in your interview. The most important thing here to keep in mind is to not get discouraged. You will apply for tons of jobs, and if you haven't applied for tons of jobs, you're really not doing this process correctly. If you apply to 1,000 jobs, you might not even hear from 500 of them. They'll just silently ignore you. And you will get rejected. You're sometimes competing for entry-level programming jobs against people with 5 to 10 years of experience in that field. You can't control the economy, and in 2023, we're in a tiny bit of a dip with a market filled with good developers trying to get new jobs. If you get rejected, the best possible thing to say is simply, I really appreciated your time and consideration. I loved getting to see the cool things your company is doing, and I appreciate your time. That's it. Don't try to argue or bargain. Ask them to reconsider. Just thank them for their time and move on. Remember, this is a numbers game. If you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments below. I have some suggestions for finding jobs at almost every stage of your career, and I'd be happy to share those with you in another video if there's interest. And remember, programming is easy, even if finding a job
I'm about to fade away, cause every time I wake up I feel like it's Monday. Something's going wrong with all the chemicals up in my brain. All of a sudden I don't look at anything.